Turn it over to Michael and thank him for being here and thank him for supplying the entertainment, which we're going to enjoy later. And we're really looking forward to hearing the Gigmaster story. So thanks, Mike.
All right. Thank you, Peter. And thank you guys all for coming out tonight. Nothing I love more than to talk about Gigmasters, so this is great. So, can't believe I'm putting this picture up here, but so for me, the story really does begin, when I first started playing the violin back at age 4 with the Suzuki School. Don't worry, it's going to move more quickly, I know. Because the next slide, I'm already in college. So I studied music. My father was a musician. He was a violinist, and he played with the Cincinnati Symphony for a while until he started having kids and then decided to get into teaching. But he used to tell me stories about as a, struggling musician, earning just minimal dollars and, going from city to city. So I went to Indiana University and I was a music major. I studied viola performance there. And about halfway through, I just started thinking really in practical terms, like, do I really, am I really able to make a living from music and from gigging, really? And, I kind of chickened out. So that's the honest truth. I just wasn't sure, like, if that was what I could do. And so, after college, I ended up doing a bit of a career change. I ended up, majoring in economics, and I started working for some financial companies. I worked for a mutual fund company named Scudder. And it was during that period of time where I had this idea that I would, for some reason, want to be a financial analyst. I have no idea why I thought that would be fun. It was a 3-year exam to become a CFA, and didn't love it, did not love it. In fact, it's a funny story because I was halfway through the first exam, and you get to go to lunch, and I handed in the test, and I was like, that's it, I'm out. So my first lesson here in this presentation is just really life is too short to not do something that you love. And so I kind of realized that, probably around age 25, 26. And so next thing you know, I'm living in a house in White Plains. One of my roommates is Kevin Kenyon, who is now, a business partner. And again, I was still working in finance, but I was really at the point where I was wanting to get out of it. And we were sitting around and we were just trying to think of, like, the internet, the web was just starting to, gain traction. You were just starting to hear about, websites, the internet. It was nothing like it is right now. I mean, it was really just in the infancy. And we both said that we just want to get in on the ground floor. And you can just imagine us kind of just sitting around on a couch, drinking some beers, trying to think, what could we do as a business? Like, what would be something that we could, make money at, but also like to do? And that's where the whole music tie-in came in, and we started crafting this idea of, maybe we can make a website that somehow, helps musicians. And at that time, we're broader now, but at the time it was really focused on bands and musicians. And so basically, I spent the next year or two just immersing myself in web technologies. I did not, have a computer science degree, but I just, picked up an HTML book, started diving into CGI, Perl, JavaScript. I don't even think I had Photoshop. I think it was like Paintbrush Pro at the time. And really just like eating, sleeping, breathing it, and trying to construct this business. And we knew nothing about starting a business. And I mean, I tell you, we knew nothing. I mean, that is like, we had never done it before. We were like, let's just go on this adventure. Let's just see what happens. So I think one of the lessons that I really learned that early on in the very beginning, I was able to do the coding and all the technical stuff, and Kevin did everything else. He did all the billing, the customer service, the marketing, the sales. I mean, just anything not programming, he would do. And so we had this nice division early on, and I would just, honestly, I would code like late at nights. I had a full-time job, as did Kevin, through this early period of time, but we were just building, and it was not perfect. We weren't thinking about, how will this scale or what's the proper architecture. We were just like, let's just get something out there and let's just see if people will use it. And it was amazing. I mean, we really did. We started getting, CDs in the mail from bands, and we would go into, Manhattan and go to various clubs and hand out flyers. We would advertise in the Village Voice. We'd go to these music festivals all around. And as we were, just slowly growing the business, we would see it starting to gain traction. But again, for many years, I was still working full-time jobs during the day. So this was like on my lunch hour, at night, definitely on the weekends. And I was, single at the time, so I could just spend all my time just coding away. And so that really helped. This is a picture yeah, you cannot get that sweater anymore. I mean, that is an antique right now. But basically, one of the third lesson I learned here is really find a good partner to take the journey with. And so, yeah, for me, Kevin was the perfect partner. He handled, like I said, all the non-technical aspects. I focused on technology. And, there was times where, like, I might be discouraged about, is this really going to make it? And then he could sort of prop me up and be like, yeah, we can do it. And then vice versa. If he was feeling down, I would prop him up. So in those early years, to this day, it's really been a good situation. Okay, so this is one of the first renditions of our homepage, and you graphic designers will be cringing as you look at this. But that, I think, is impact font, if I can remember correctly. But we just wanted to get something out there. And again, not perfect. We didn't have a professional designer at the time, but people were finding it. It was amazing. We tried all sorts of things, and this is one thing I really want to drive home. We did not even have the exact pricing or revenue model worked out from the very beginning. It went through a whole bunch of evolutions, and we just tried different things. Of course, in the beginning, it was just all free listings. We just wanted to get these musicians signed up to the site, so just building the database. Then we're like, all right, why don't we try like 10% commissions? And honestly, for Kevin and I, this was not like after spending hours and hours of analysis. We were sitting around with a beer and saying, why don't we just try 10% commissions? It's truth. And so we tried that. Then we were like, well, I don't know, maybe that's not so good. Why don't we try making the members pay when they get the lead? So we would try that for a while. And maybe that wasn't so good. So why don't we try, so 10% commissions weren't good. Why don't we try 5%, but why don't we call them booking fees instead of commissions? So we try that. Well, who should pay the fees? So why don't we try having the performer pay the fee? You know what, on second thought, why don't we have the client pay the fee? Let's try that for a while. And this is a live site with customers that have been with us for a while, and we're just trying these things out. It's a little bumpy when, some of the members are not, used to this radical change, but we just felt passionately like we wanted to try these things. So now, it's a situation where sometimes the client pays the fee, sometimes the performer pays the fee. Oh, and by the way, we brought back free listings. So the point here is that try a lot of stuff. We tried a CD store in the very beginning, and I got this from the Wayback Archive. It's definitely not around anymore. We tried a trivia contest. We tried a chat room. We're talking like the late 90s, early 2000s. You have to have a chat room. We tried that. But the main thing is that we stayed focused on this core idea, which is we want to have a website that helps clients book entertainers. That's it. We don't want to do record deals. We don't want to do tours. We want to have a site that's actually useful, that actually helps people do a specific thing, which is book entertainment. So even though these designs are archaic, the core, if you look at it, it's the core focus is still there. We stuck with that focus even though we played around with different looks and feels over the years. But if you look at it, it's still the core principle, even till today with our current design, which is, thank God, much more professional looking. So yeah, lesson 4, try lots of stuff, but just keep focused on that one idea. At least for us, that was what worked well. So then there was the business plan, which I don't know why, but I had this thing where I was procrastinating as long as humanly possible. I just did not want to take the time to actually write the plan. I mean, we had a business plan, but it was in our heads, but we just didn't actually write it down. And it was the thing that I was most dreading actually taking the time to do, which I know probably breaks every rule of, starting a business. Like, this is supposed to be the thing you do first, but we decided to, wait a few years. I think we did it after 4 years. I don't want to waste time doing a 20-page document, I guess, if the business isn't going to work. So anyway, we finally did it. I went to Staples. I think it was a software package called Business Plan Pro, and just followed the steps. Somehow it came out with a 19-page document, and it worked out well. So just write the business plan just in case, because it has come in very handy. I'd be in conversations over the years with potential investors or business partners, or just folks that just want to know more about the business, and I'm able to refer back to the plan. The thing that's amazing to me is if I read that, it was written in 2001. If I read it today, a lot of it still holds true. So that is a good thing, but definitely do the business plan. I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is not a joke. Our first check for $49 was from a band named Pecker. I am not making this up. They say you never forget your first, well, anyway. I actually wanted to include the original check on this presentation, and I asked Kevin about it, and he's like, oh, I threw it out. I was like, what? You threw out a bit of our first check? And he's like, I didn't want the clutter. So anyway, this is a screenshot, but the point here is have a revenue model from the very beginning. And I know this is, there's all these companies out there that, are going public or about to go public. They don't even have revenue models well defined yet. And I know that's what you read about all the time, and those are the big success stories. But at least for us, what worked for us just bootstrapping this thing was just to have a revenue model from the very beginning. And what we did is, in the early days, didn't take on debt. Again, we were working our full-time jobs to finance it, but anytime we made revenue, we plowed it back into the business. But again, we wanted to make sure we had a revenue model right from the start. And that one seems pretty obvious, but it's just, you'd be amazed how many companies like that comes later. I don't know. I don't get that. Okay, so this is John Sortino, and John is the founder of Vermont Teddy Bear. So at some point in the early 2000s, Kevin decided he wanted to live in a cabin in Vermont. Again, not making any of this stuff up. He just thought it would be kind of fun to try. So I had moved down to New York City. He's up in a cabin in Vermont. We're running the business, virtually at the time. And he somehow runs into or connects with John Sortino, the founder of the Vermont Teddy Bear, has lunch with him. And then a few months later, John comes down to the city, and we have dinner with him. And I'm telling you, the stories that he told, it was amazing. He started selling these teddy bears on the streets of Burlington, Vermont. And he did that for 10 years before he actually, before the thing kicked into high gear, and it became a public company. But for us, that was really cool to hear that somebody else had bootstrapped it for that many years. And this was in the midst of the dot-com craze that we were talking to John, and we were, hearing all these things on the news about these companies that, they get started, and a year later they're going public. So John just keeps it real, and he says, look, I did it for 10 years before it really, took off. And so that was really reassuring for us. We ended up convincing him to join our board of directors. And we got a lot of mileage off that. People just saw his name on our About Us page, and it really helped. So anyway, lesson learned there is just try to seek advice from others that have like traveled a similar path. It's not as helpful, at least for me, when I talk to people that have like, oh yeah, I ran 5 businesses before, and I went public in a year. For me, it's better to talk to people who have like taken that long road, which is what we have. Okay, so again, Paintbrush Pro on a lot of this stuff here on these logos, but our look and feel for many years was sort of like a little bit on the amateurist side. The branding was just very homegrown, and our traffic, had started to just sort of level off. And we made what I think is one of our best decisions throughout the business history, which is to hire Marissa Latshaw as our VP of Marketing. And she came on board, and I just want to have her come up and just tell a little bit about what she did when she joined our team.
Hey everyone. So I'm going to embarrass Mike a little bit. So one of the first things I did when I met Mike was find out a little bit more about Gigmasters. We were sort of personal friends at the time. I was friends with his wife, and after taking a look at some of those designs, one of the first meetings we had was, what is marketing? Okay, so I thought it would be a good idea to talk a little bit about my background in marketing, because I'd worked in a bunch of different organizations at that point, and marketing kind of meant something different in each place. It was sort of business development in one place. It was sales in another place with a little bit of a marketing spin. It was the communications department for a sales team. So marketing meant so many different things, and I thought it was really important that we kind of talk about what all these possibilities of what marketing could be for Gigmasters and how we might potentially work that in. And it was a great meeting. Obviously, they asked me to come back, which was really nice. I was a consultant at the time. And we turned that into so like a weekly get-together. In the evenings, we would talk a little bit about strategy and think about the customers and some of the same issues we even talk about today. We were talking about then, but obviously that's all evolved. I think what was really the most kind of informative time for me in this early period was just talking to the customers. And as somebody coming in from the outside, I mean, anytime you work with a marketing person, I hope that the first thing they do is to talk to your customers. And if you're a marketer yourself, obviously continue to talk to your customers, because that is obviously the fuel behind your business. So we had these two constituencies. We had the clients, the people who were planning the events, and we had these members who were the performers, as we call them. We've now expanded that further. So through talking to these people, I was realizing that the website didn't really match what people were saying. There were some aspects of it that were, but what was really resonating with people, especially on the client side, the people who were planning these events, was really like the end result. It was the event that really gave them that positive brand image of Gigmasters. So from that point, it really just became obvious what needed to happen, and that was that the site needed to reflect what people loved about the brand, but just what weren't celebrating about it. So that's what we did. We embarked on this, strategic process to figure out what this brand is going to look like in a visual form, and take all the great technology that Mike had built and really, bring it to the forefront so that people understood what they were getting when they arrived on that home page or an interior page. So through a little bit of a search process, we found a designer that was just the right fit. And how cool is it that he's in this room tonight? It's Brian Miller. Say hi, Brian. So then that kind of got the whole ball rolling. And from that point on, the marketing group has grown. We work really closely with the technology group on product issues, as well as as sales and expansion of the brand. So it's been a really wild ride. It's been really fun working with Mike and Kevin, and now 34 other people that are on the team, some of which are in this room and are awesome. So it's been a great time, and I'm going to turn it back over.
Thank you. So that's lesson learned number 8. Just know when it's time to hire a great marketing person. So that was a big milestone in the company's history. So on the technology side, yeah, things were starting to get more complex. So now we're, 2009, 2010. We've started hiring some developers. Things weren't as straightforward as just HTML and JavaScript anymore. And so I was getting a bit in over my head on the technology side. We had hired, a handful of programmers that all had computer degrees. And they started asking me questions about, what about Agile and Scrum, and what about unit testing? And I'm like, just do it, just code. But that just wasn't enough for some reason. So again, probably the second biggest thing we've done, smartest thing we've done in the history is bring on Mike Rogers to be our VP of Technology. So I thought it might be interesting to have him just talk about what he did when he first got here on the technology side.
So I'll be brief, but I want to build on what Mike and Marissa talked about, which is when you're dealing with technology, up front, you really don't want to worry about it being perfect, right? So Mike slaved for 10 years. Some of his code is still in production. That stuff has value. Get the features out to the customers early, often, and constantly. And you'll have people who are unhappy with bugs and things like that, but when you're getting it off the ground, it's really important to focus on just shipping it. Get stuff done. And it takes a long time. And until you have that critical mass, Mike did a really smart thing, which was build the business to a point where then it could support marketing to build the business larger and then begin to flesh out what the technology is. Until your business is large enough, you don't have scale problems. What you build is going to be just fine to get things off the ground, get your initial customers, know what's going on. If everybody here is familiar with Groupon, Groupon started out as a FileMaker database. That's how those guys first built the coupons. They put them in FileMaker, they printed them out. And that's how Groupon got kicked off. So that's the first piece. The second piece, and it shows through in the way Mike has included Marissa and I in this presentation, is hire the right people. And hire people that are solid and dedicated and will do anything to get the job done and love working with you and love working on the project. And I think that stuff is even more important than all the tactics and all the methodologies and all the technology you could possibly use. There are still parts of our site that are based on stuff from the late 90s, and it still runs and it's making us money. And we could leave it there and it would still run and make us money. So now there is obviously professionally, you want to begin to grow that. We need to build an awesome team. Mike started out with 5 awesome developers when I got there. We've added 3 more. And really you need to focus on people who are self-motivated, self-organizing. Companies today, you need to be hiring people who are willing to work with each other. A lot of times in technology, you'll find people, not so much anymore, but you'll still find those ones who want to work alone. They want to control the process. They want to just be all, do all, and that doesn't fly anymore. You won't get anything done. You won't build a great product for your customers. So I think those are kind of the things to keep in mind from a technology standpoint before you even approach what technology do I use. It doesn't really matter. Find something, get it going, get it off the ground. Find something that works for your company and then build it from there. And you can always change, you can always iterate. As Mike showed us, it works. And changing and adjusting to market conditions is really the focus of everything. So I'll give it back to Mike.
Thanks, Mike. So yeah, so lesson number 9 was just know when it's time to stop coding. So for me, that was like, it's finally time to stop. And that was actually really hard for me. I loved it. I wasn't good, but I loved it. So now, really, I do not touch the code, and I think they're all happy about that. But it's allowed me to focus on bigger picture stuff, working on the company culture, more strategic focus, and things like that. So anyway, that was a big milestone, bringing Mike on and having me stay away from that code. So yeah, so we're near the end here. But yeah, been a long journey for us. Just to kind of recap the timeline, we launched the website in '97. In 2001 was when we actually had our first booking. So it was, the site is a transactional system when a client actually books the vendor on our site. So in 2001 we had our first booking. It wasn't until 2007 that we hired our first full-time employee. That was Aaron, our customer service manager. And so 10 years after we launched was when we actually hired our first full-timer. I know this type of long, stretched out journey might not be for everybody, but for us, it did work. And then in 2011, we finally got live phones, and that was a big one for me. I hate companies when you call them and you cannot reach a live person. And it bugged me for so long that we weren't staffed for that. We just couldn't do it. We now have a team of 11 people manning the phones, email, chat, delivering awesome service. So that was a big milestone for us. And so here we are in 2013. We're nearing 20,000 vendors on the site. We have about 31 full-time plus some part-timers. We just hit our 212,000th booking done through the actual site, and we're over $3 million in revenue. So we're pleased about that. But the final lesson here is just be prepared for the long haul. At least for us, this was not a sprint. This was an ultra marathon. But really, really fun, and I wouldn't want to do it differently at all. So I'll just end off with one quote that I love, and I think it really captures the essence of how I feel about it, which is just persistence. It's like, if I persist long enough, I will win. And for Kevin and I, we made this implicit agreement with each other that no matter what happens, we're keeping this thing going. If we're just 2 people working out of a Kinko's, or we're up to 30 people working in a nice office in Norwalk, no matter what, we're going to keep it going. So I'm convinced that if we just persist long enough and we're strategic and we get the right team in place, we are going to win. Thank you.
This is awesome.
Letterman.
So, can you guys actually move these to the side? They're going to block the video. So thank you so much for that presentation. That was terrific, and we appreciate the time you put into it. Your story is interesting, and I've heard it, from afar from Mike. This and that's going on. And I'm a musician as well, so we all have these dreams that we could do something interesting, and we also have seen. I think we all have seen some tremendous wedding bands, like the most amazing musicians in the world. Sometimes you'll just run into at a bar mitzvah or a wedding. You say, how do those people get that gig? How do they keep their business going? So I think it's people like you that sort of are keeping that live music business, that other tier of it, not the one where artists who once were making a fair amount of money on CDs and don't make that money anymore. The big artists are now touring like crazy. And these smaller artists that never really made money on recorded music, they're now, they've got a service like yours to keep them busy.
Yeah, we have a lot of weekend warriors on the site. These are folks who might be a lawyer by day and a comedian at night or on the weekends. So it's definitely that cross-section of the population.
Right. And did you talk at all about, I might have missed it, in terms of the breadth of the business in terms of where you are nationally or internationally at this point?
Well, in terms of the breadth, I mean, we started out focused solely on musicians, so bands, soloists, ensembles, and then our breadth grew, and we've always been national, US and Canada, but then we grew by expanding into variety entertainers. So we went from just having bands to now having comedians, clowns, hypnotists, magicians. I mean, an incredible amount of variety of anything you could possibly think about, any type of live performer at a party. So we really expanded that way. And then more recently, we're getting increasingly ambitious and expanding into other vendor types like photographers, videographers, bartenders, caterers. So that's the big initiative for this year that we haven't even scratched the surface on that.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to get our video crew your information for.
Yeah, I have my card.
Tell us a little more about when you look across business. You sort of had this idea. That's the DJ warming
DJ's
up.
here.
You had this idea and you started down the path. You didn't quite know where you're going, and at a certain point, my guess is you saw different companies as they were progressing, and maybe you said, maybe we're like them. Maybe we're a little like this. I know that Vermont Teddy Bear is a great example of someone that you're sort of like, but you're really not, except for persistence, maybe not all that similar to Vermont Teddy Bear. Who are the companies along the way that you thought you might represent?
Well, the one company that we often cite when we're trying to describe ourselves is eBay, because it's a transactional model that brings a buyer and a seller together, and they conduct a transaction on our site. So even though that's a completely different genre, it's not music or entertainment, but when we're trying to explain to folks like what we do, it's not an advertising model. We don't have banner ads. We bring buyer and seller together. So eBay is kind of a site that we do cite as like having a business model that we want to replicate.
Mm-hmm. And the site is beautiful, by the way. I recommend you all take a look at it in terms of a highly functioning site with a lot of things you can do on it. It's very interesting the way you've pulled it all together. I assume you've done a fair amount of user testing. Is that something maybe you guys could talk about a little bit? Is that how has that process worked over the years in terms of your interface and things like that?
Sure. Yeah. When we did the initial design, we actually we brought users in, we watched them do it, but over time, look at services like flow and watch how people are using the site. We've done a bunch of A/B testing to see different buttons work. So yeah, testing is important. We're doing it more and more, simply because we've got the volume to really give you some.
Right.
Is really super valuable. The more you test, the better.
Right. Yep. You got it. The chair for our microphones have gates on them. No, you just you just want to get right on it.
I was going to say, one huge asset that we have that a lot of other internet companies don't are our account services department, who are talking to both our members who pay to be on the site and our customers who are using the site on a daily basis. And a huge amount of feedback comes through them dealing with those people on a daily basis. And we take that seriously, and quite often those features or those requests or those challenges make it into the product. So that's a huge piece of it is direct client feedback. And we're fortunate enough to have a large staff to handle those things and bring it in.
Interesting. And let's talk. But I'm interested on the data side, because it's pretty fascinating, right? When you have so much to measure these days, how are you as the tech leader delivering that sort of data? Do you do it? Are you basically testing constantly and delivering a report? I mean, what's the sort of process?
Yeah. So we're getting more and more sophisticated with it. Right now, we're in the middle of a redesign. A great example is we've been looking at how different treatments to our search results page, which is where vendors would actually be listed, how that affects the conversion to a request. So do changes in those results and how we present vendors in kind of a list format translate to someone put a request in to get quotes from these vendors. So we've been doing that in an A/B format. We use Google Analytics for obviously our analytics side. We've built some in-house tools. We have a lot of data in terms of how people use the site, where they go on the site. We're constantly looking at conversion rates. So I'll talk more about the conversion rates, because that's what she lives and breathes.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying earlier, we've got these kind of two streams of things that are happening. We've got these members that are signing up, and we're trying, that's one part of our revenue model. And then we've got the clients that are booking. We have the booking fee that Mike mentioned. So absolutely, we're always looking at the top of the funnel and how we're filling the top of the funnel, and then what's going on, throughout the process and how those conversions are happening. And certainly when we embark on anything that's new on the site, it's important to test it and see how it's going to work. And we recently, the test that Mike was referring to, it gave us some really good insight into yes, this page looks better. Will it actually perform better? So to make sometimes what you think pretty obvious, but sometimes what you think is going to work isn't at all what ends up working. So yeah, absolutely, testing is critical, and I couldn't really emphasize enough re-emphasize the point of this feedback loop that we get constantly from our account services team. It's just so key to everything that we do. It kind of stems back from the early days of one person just calling and getting a small sample size. Now we have a much greater. Right.
So that's very cool, and having a sophisticated platform where you can, I assume, carve off a little bit and see how they react to something new. I got to imagine that's pretty powerful. It's a tool that, as a marketer, you sort of would die for, right?
I mean, my background, in the early days is direct response marketing, and really, the internet is no different. Right. When it comes down to it, you always want your conversion, you want your profitability, you want to make sure that you're growing the business in the right ways and doing things profitably as possible.
Right. So another question is about bootstrapping, which I think you guys are a tremendous example. I mean, the 6 years till your first full-time employee. That's a long slog, and you're still pushing very hard to get to where you want to get. But I know there's a lot of companies out there that really, as you mentioned, feel they're going to make this. They have some brilliant idea and make it a quick turnaround. It's easy for those companies to be replaced by other companies also. I mean, do you feel like one of your strengths as a business and a potential investment opportunity long term is that it's really freaking hard to do what you guys do in terms of the entertainers you represent and the customers you have? Is that sort of your secret sauce almost?
Well, it's definitely one of the things. I mean, the relationship that we have with our members, so the folks on the vendor side, we are really members of Gigmasters, and many of them have been with us for, as long as 10 years. And so that relationship that we have with them, through the website, but also talking to our account services people, it would be, I think, difficult to replicate that just overnight. So I think that's definitely a strong advantage that we've had just over time. And then also, as I was saying in the presentation, just all the different tests that we've done of different pricing models and revenue models. Like, if it's been thought of, we've tried it. And so, we have a lot of years of tests that we've done, and then building the relationships with these members. That has been so key.
Great. Okay, cool. Well, I've got a few more questions, but why don't I open it up to the audience? If you have a question, just come on up to the microphone. No, Daryl's first. He's near the microphone.
Hi, great presentation. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
And I haven't seen the site, so I'm not sure how you ensure the quality of the vendors. So if you could speak to that, that'd be.
I can try that one. So any vendor can initially sign up with our site, but then quickly the cream rises to the top. We have a review system in place, and this is a lot different from a lot of these sites where anybody can just pop onto the site and leave a review for a vendor. You actually have to conduct the booking. As a client, you actually have to conduct your booking through our site. You have to pay money, and then after the event takes place, then you leave the review. There is no easy way, let's say, for a vendor to fake the reviews, and that's a big thing. I don't know if you guys have been reading any about this, but so again, anybody can sign up. It's not scalable to have an audition process. At least at this point, but the review process is big. And then one of the projects we want to do for next year is like looking into background checks and things like that. So we've got things that are scalable. We've got some things in the pipeline to really help ensure that further.
Alex?
Yeah, question I have is for you, Marissa. I know it sounded like a pretty elegant way that he hired you to redo stuff and add marketing, but the backstory, I'm curious because I'm in the design field. When you came to him and you said, you know what, we need to change some stuff, how easy was that?
That's a great question. It wasn't that hard.
Good client.
Yeah, I mean, it was really just backed by a lot of information that I had gathered from talking to the customers. I didn't really have to sell the idea as much as say, this is what your customers are saying. And was open to it? Absolutely, yeah, I would say so. Yeah, this is what your customers are saying, and I think the timing was right because they knew they were ready for a change, and
it's absolutely beautiful. I looked at the site. It's great. It looks a lot better than what I saw. Any other questions from the audience? Yep, come on up on the microphone. Thank you.
Say that you've learned things from your customers. Have you learned anything about parties that you were surprised about? Anything new?
Oh, that's a great question. In fact, I am presenting on that exact topic in 2 weeks at BizBash in New York. You know, I think one thing that we see all the time with parties is that people are completely open to different ideas, but it's sometimes hard to present. So I would say, you know, we see some trends on the budget. Certainly there are people who are very budget conscious. That's one thing for sure. And people, as a result, are getting creative with that. And our vendors have had to get creative with that as well. So extending their services is one thing that they might perform for the ceremony, but offer, you know, services throughout. You know, certainly the eco-friendly events is another aspect of parties that we see, and that, you know, if you follow any of the event press, that's, you know, obviously a big area as well. You know, I think with all of the crazy reality shows, there's like an expectation around that. So I think people are trying to really put like this personal touch, make something really wow and unique. Certainly in the wedding space, that's a constant. But I think it's even like moved its way into the corporate space and the kids' party space. So, so you know, that's what a site like ours does so well, is present all of these different options. People can find that fire eater, or, you know, the photo booths are super popular. Balloon twisters are really popular, but not only at kids' events. You know what I mean? So I think there's just a lot of you know, mixing and matching of all these different vendor categories, all these different events. It's not always it's not always what you think. Does that help? I don't know. Yeah.
If you have a question, could you get up on the microphone? Thanks.
Yeah, I'm just curious about how you find your customers, because, you know, these are people, I mean, some of them might throw a party every week, but this is generally like a once per year or a once per lifetime kind of thing. And I was just wondering, A, how do you find them? And B, if you have investors, how did you convince them you knew how to find them?
Well, I'll take the first part of that, and then you maybe take the second part of that. Thank God for Google, right? I mean, we rank, I think we rank high for these long tail searches. So the city category searches is right in our sweet spot. So somebody searching for the jazz band in San Francisco or photographer in New York, we're going to rank high, A, because we've been there the longest, and B, because Mike is, and the team is excellent at SEO. So we've really been able to make the site work, make the search engines work really hard for us. But beyond that, you know, we've just continued to try to get our name out there and attract traffic, and we've seen, you know, doubling of traffic over time. So it's been in that way. Do you want to take the part?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say what she basically said, which is we get a lot of traffic from SEO. And so we are highly reliant on Google for the bulk of our traffic. And that does make investors skittish. So that's something that over the near to medium term, you know, I think we really want to figure out new ways to get clients that is outside of this SEO and paid search realm. So we're doing a ton of stuff in social media, but yeah, that is something that the investors that can be skittish on.
Question coming up. Here it comes.
How are you funded so far? How are you funding the company, and how would you explain your revenue model?
Yeah, so we've bootstrapped it all the way, and then only recently we took on a little bit of debt to do some more hiring that we felt was really essential. So other than just early on in the very first few years, we did have some friends and family money to kind of get things off the ground. And then a couple years back, we had a couple $100,000 invested in us in the form of debt, and we're open to the possibility of an equity investment at this point, but have not done anything like that. As far as our revenue model, yeah, I mean, I just try to explain it as, we bring buyer and seller together, and when a transaction occurs, we earn a booking fee from that. And we also do have a membership fee that the vendors pay, and that's all the servicing that we do to get the profiles, helping them get the profiles set up, delivering great customer service to them. So basically 2 revenue streams at this point: membership fees and booking fees.
My name is Justin. How do you guys advertise to the vendors? I mean, is it the same thing? Is it SEO as well?
Yeah, it's actually funny when we do let's say paid search first. Let me take that one, and we take out put a paid search ad mentioning that we book magicians in Norwalk. It's amazing how a magician in Norwalk will tend to find that ad. I think they might be, doing some Google searches themselves to see like who's ranking, and our name tends to come up like first or second, on the organic side, and then you'll also see us often on the paid search side. So what happens is these vendors are like, oh, okay, these guys are like all over Google. Their membership prices are pretty low, and so we'll get on board with Gigmasters and we'll have the benefit of their SEO, which is, it's easier for us to rank in some cases because of the huge quantity of, the power of our domain and the huge database that we have. And so for a single vendor in a local area, it can be hard to rank. And so they'll sometimes join us for that benefit. So yeah, a lot of it mostly is SEO and paid search at this point, with expanding into using social networks, doing some inbound marketing techniques to kind of like attract the vendors. We don't do, cold calling or anything like that.
Chris?
How many years does it take to break the $1 million mark in sales? And how big are you at that time?
Let's see, that's a great question. Yeah, so he's saying, how long did it take us to hit $1 million in revenue? Kevin would know the answer to this like right off the bat. I would say probably maybe 2008 or something like that, 2008, 2009. I would want to double check that, but it took a while, yeah. I mean, we definitely did it gradually. I mean, it was not the hockey stick. I would love to see the hockey stick. I'm determined to to accelerate things. I'm not really looking to take another 15 years at this pace. So we're definitely more ambitious, but yeah, it was a gradual climb to that $1 million.
So this is an ignorant question, but the $3 million includes what you pay to the entertainers, or is that $3 million is your take?
Yeah, that's our take.
That's your take, right?
Yeah,
good.
we do have a whole deposit balance payment system where a client can pay the deposit for the event or the balance payment, and that goes through our system. But no, that doesn't count as our revenue. That would help, but I don't think that would fly.
Well, I did, yeah, I mean, it made 3 million revenue makes sense for 30 employees. It's a pretty good fit there. So what are the next steps? Are you potentially going to find some competitors to buy? Are you looking to, what's the sort of roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, the big initiative right now, as I mentioned, is expanding into these non-entertainment categories. So just from a strategic point of view, we're really single company focus on, growing into, photographers, videographers, all those other services. There's some big brands, as you probably all know, in, say, like the wedding space. And then there's these like niche sites that do like, let's say, just photographers or just limos. There really yet is not one brand that is the go-to brand for where you would go to book events. And it's kind of surprising. You would think by this point, somebody would have put the stake in the ground. The wedding guys are pretty entrenched in that wedding brand. And so we feel like we have this opportunity in front of us to become that events services brand. And really, so that's the singular focus of our growth strategy right now. And like I mentioned before, yeah, we're more open now to, taking on some equity investments. I mean, we've been reluctant in the past because, you don't want to lose control, and, right. It comes with a high price tag, as we've learned over the last couple of years. So we love the independence, and that's been really important to us. But, we're starting to open our minds to that possibility.
Well, let's talk about the risk, because the risk is their books are totally wrong, right? Or their clientele is really unhappy, and you just don't know it. I mean, what other sort of things you worry about when you think about a potential acquisition? What's the,
Oh, you mean if we were to acquire other companies? Yeah, no, that is not something that it seems we're more like wanting to build it ourselves. So I don't really see that in our near future.
Right.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, the devil's in the details. You start doing all the due diligence and you uncover all this stuff, and then it takes you off of your focus. So we're still so small that we want to really stay focused on just growing ourselves.
Right. Excellent. Okay, so well, I think that's about it. Unless there's any more question? Come on up.
What would you consider your top 3 competitors?
I knew that question was coming. Yeah, so I would say our most direct competitor is a company called Gig Salad, and they started a couple years back and, working hard just like we are. So they're pretty close to what we do. We've obviously have a major head start on them, but they're, a direct competitor. And then I would say some competitors to extent in the wedding space. So, 40% of our business is weddings. And so there's some big players in that space that I sort of, consider to some degree competitors of ours. And then, I don't know if you guys have heard of another company, Thumbtack, just a few years back, just well-funded now. And they're doing really all services, so not just events, although events is a big piece for them. They're doing booking everything, a painter, a plumber. So that's a bigger undertaking. But I guess in the event space, I would list them as one of our competitors.
All right, cool. So I have one last question for you, and it relates to team, and it relates to sort of the climate, and a big topic for us here in Stamford and in Fairfield County is, we're not especially known as being a tremendous center of startup activity, but there is an awful lot of talent. I mean, talk about, the people you found here, how they feel about being in Fairfield County. Talk about, that from a Gigmasters point of view. And do you feel like this place is, inhibiting you, or is a great place for you to find the people you need to grow?
Yeah, I mean, for me, just real quick, personally, I used to, live and work in the city. And then after 9/11, I just had to get out of the city. I was, traumatized like many people. So I, moved up into Fairfield County. And yeah, we've been able to, obviously sitting next to me are 2 very talented people that we were able to find here. We love having the team all together in our Connecticut office. As you guys were mentioning before, tech and marketing, being able to work closely with account services and get direct customer feedback has been great. Yeah, on the technology side, yeah, it does take a little bit longer to find the developer. Thankfully, Mike seems to have a vast network of developers that he can tap. But yeah, I mean, it would be, it would be quicker if we were in New York City or Boston or something like that to find tech talent. But I'll tell you, the team that we have, these guys this is an A team. And so you just build a little more time into the plan. So it's like, if we decide like in January we want to hire 2 more developers, we just plan that it'll take a few more months to find it. And I really feel like my role now is to just help build the best team. So even though you might be tempted to just rush a hire, we do take the time to hire. But we've been across the board, marketing, tech, customer service, and sales. We've done well here.
Excellent. Well, you really have, and you're employing 30 people, which is fantastic. You're bringing a lot of joy to people's lives, which is great. And we're going to get to hear one of your entertainers tonight, which we really appreciate. Most of all, we appreciate you sharing your story. So I would a big round of applause for Mike, Marissa, and Mike.